Hello, thank you so much for joining me, astrologer Patrick Arundell. Welcome. Today I'm going to do a deep dive into the 13th Zodiac Sign controversy, which has once more blown up. Now, some of my esteemed colleagues have produced videos refuting this, and also I sent a statement out to my 17,000 subscribers. But despite this, my followers on YouTube and Facebook have continued to contact me over the weekend asking, has their zodiac sign changed? And the simple answer is no. So what's happened here? Well, I'm going to go into a bit more detail and explain the background, the history of Western Tropical Astrology, and also give you a brief insight into sidereal astrology, which still uses the 12 zodiac signs, doesn't use 13, but does take the relationship of the Earth in terms of the way the wobble has affected the angle to the constellations above. It does reflect that more directly, whereas the Western Tropical Zodiac is based on the seasons, and the constellations above were purely symbolic. Now, if you do like your information in more bite-sized pieces, please see beneath this video, because two of my esteemed colleagues, Russell Grant, a leader in popular astrology, both sides of the Atlantic, for over 30 years. Russell gives a hugely impassioned response to this, and that's beneath this video. Also, Victor Oliver, who's the editor of the august Astrological Journal of Great Britain, Victor gives a very adroit, nuanced, bit more intellectual take on the situation, but again, it's to the point, downloadable quickly, and that again is beneath this video, so please check those out if you wish. But I just want to go back a little bit in time to explain the context. Western Tropical Zodiac is based on 4 seasons, and each of those 4 seasons has 3 zodiac signs in them. And each zodiac signs have an element of fire, of earth, of air, and of water. And also they have a mode of operation which is cardinal, it's fixed, and it's mutable. There's only 3 of those. So we have these groups, so in total we have 12, and the circle that they work their way around, so the sun's relationship to the earth is really what astrology is about, and that circle is 360 degrees. So it begins, the whole process begins, and was identified, Western Tropical Zodiac was more formalized, if you like, and we mustn't underestimate how intelligent and how informed and how clever people were many years hence. So around 2,600 years ago, if we take the point where the sun is directly above the equator, and the point between night and day is about the same, that is known as the equinox, and that happens twice a year, and the first one is called the Vernal Equinox, and that is the start of the Western Tropical Zodiac. It always has been, and it always will be. So we take 360 degrees from that vernal or Aries point at 0 degrees Aries, and Aries is a cardinal or leader sign. Then if we go forwards, we go to the summer solstice, and that is 0 degrees Cancer. That's also a cardinal sign or leader sign. Then we go forwards to Libra, 0 degrees Libra, and we have the autumn equinox, again, where night and day are roughly the same. And then we go forwards to the winter solstice, which is 0 degrees in Capricorn. So that framework is how Western Tropical Astrology works. And the constellations above, when this process began, was Aries, but those are symbolic. Did you know that the word zodiac is actually Latin? And it actually comes from the Greek, which is, pardon my Greek if you are Greek, Zodiacus Cyclios, which means cycle, or in fact more literally cycle of animals. So what the Western Tropical Zodiac does is tells a story of when we're initiated, when we're born. But this story can be repeated in our own personal horoscope at other times of the year, from what's known as the first house, or the ascendant. Now, the zodiac sign that's rising on the eastern horizon is always our ascendant. So you could be born, for example, an Aries person, but it could be that your ascendant is Leo. So then we take that as the first point, and that divides that 360 degree wheel into 12 houses, rather like the 12 zodiac signs. And each of those houses, rather like the symbolism of those 12 constellations, has a meaning, and the relationships that those different influences and planets have with one another creates an energy, and it has been scientifically proven. Now, if you're someone who really likes hard information, beneath this video is the link for the Correlation Journal, which is produced by the Astrological Association of Great Britain, which has absolute oodles of evidence. And also we know that the force field, the magnetic force field, is affected by the movement of planets and the relationships between them. I've been an astrologer for 25 years. I used to be a business consultant. I didn't come into astrology for the money, and money has never been the driving force. It's because I care so passionately about astrology. It absolutely brings me alive, and helping people to understand the journey that their life is going through is what is so enriching. Please check out my testimonials below if you want to see what people are saying. And if you think astrology is a bit quirky or cranky, my recent clients have included a judge, a vice president of an extremely famous American corporation that you will have heard of, and also the chief exec of a British blue chip company. Again, you would have heard of that, but these are just samples of the many people that I deal with. And not everybody has those kind of posts, but I'm just saying that these are people who take astrology extraordinarily seriously, quite rightly too. So astrologers do this work because we care about people. Astrologers are interested in the humanities, which is very much to do with emotions, perceptions. It's about feelings. Now, science, on the other hand, which has a problem with astrology, is very much based on the left side of the brain. So it's all about logic, it's about maths, it's about constructs. But I just want to challenge a few things. Now, the whole debate about the 13th Zodiac sign has come about because, obviously you read it was NASA. Well, NASA didn't make the statement last week. Someone there made the statement in 2016. It's just been recycled. If I remember rightly, the first time this story cropped up in about 95 was an amateur astronomer at a Minneapolis Astronomical Society said, look, there should be a 13th Zodiac sign because of Ophiuchus. But they're not understanding that Western Tropical Zodiac is based on the seasons, and it is based on the sun's passage through the sky, and that's called the ecliptic. And yes, there are some complexities about how this works, because we have 365 degrees, not 365 days of a year, not 360 degrees, but that's why we have the leap year. And do remember that the moon actually goes around the earth 12 times a year. There were 12 disciples of Christ. So 12 is a primary and important number in this process. Now, going back to the scientists. So when the scientists look at things, they say, well, look, astrology can't be right because of the Earth's wobble on its axis, which is about 23.5 degrees, that over each century we get about a 1.4% shift in the Earth's relationship to the constellations above. So what happens is that sidereal astrology takes that into account, and that means that in sidereal astrology, say the big stellium of influences that we had in Capricorn in January, say on the 12th, which has preceded the COVID crisis, actually if we look at that stellium of influences in a Vedic chart, it's 24 degrees away, and they're all in Sagittarius. Now, before you start thinking that, well, hold on, why don't you use sidereal astrology? They're different systems, but sidereal astrology still only has 12 signs, it still only has 12 houses. So it also uses something called the 12th harmonic, dwards, which a lot of Western astrologers do use. So we pinch that, we like that bit. And there are also some very, very clever academic Western astrologers who do use sidereal astrology in their interpretations to give them an even deeper understanding. But where the astronomy comes in is that they're outraged because they feel that the Earth's passage goes across Ophiuchus. But the original template that was created was never about those 12 constellations, now 13, in quite the way that these astronomers think, because the symbolism of the animals, remember it's the cycle of the animals, is about our journey through life. And if we understand it's not just about our zodiac sign, that our personal horoscope divides that wheel by 12, and you could, for example, have your sun in the 12th house, which is a very reflective position for the sun, very Pisces influenced. You could, for example, have your Mars in the first house but not in Aries, so it could actually be in Taurus, which is a much more stable sign, and so therefore the initiation that comes from Mars in Aries, because it's the ruler of Aries, is going to work differently in the sign of Taurus from how it would if someone had Mars in Aries itself. So astrologers are calculating and calibrating so many different pieces of information, and here's the irony: we actually have to use the left side of our brain, because the basis of astrology is absolutely mathematical, but the interpretation is where the humanities come in. It's all about people, and that takes huge skill. Learning to be an astrologer is not something you can do in 5 minutes, and you can even gain a great deal of insight into astrology, but you still got to relate it back to the client in a way that they can understand, and it's meaningful for them in their individual life story. So when people come up with these statements that astrology is broken, there's a 13th Zodiac sign, it's enormously malicious, to be honest, because if you think about it, the sun sign is the first point of our interest in astrology, to identify who we are. Our identity is so crucial to our journey through this life, because it's all about validation. Now, as we get more into astrology, we might find that although we've got the sun, say in my case, in Aquarius, I've actually got the midpoint in Aquarius too, which gives me an even greater Aquarian dimension. That's where we take the midpoint between the sun and the moon, and that's in Aquarius too. But if you take where my ascendant is, although it's in Libra, a lot of my first house overlay or cusp is actually in Scorpio, and that therefore gives a much different kind of a different perspective, a different hue to that initially Aquarius chart. Also have a lot of planets in the 4th house, very feeling, very Cancerian. So there's so much complexity in a personal horoscope analysis that we can bring to your situation. And the sun sign, or if you're watching my videos on YouTube and you're viewing the videos in terms of your ascendant or your moon, that's only a very fractional part of the overall story. So I want to explain that story of the life of a human being, and it begins with the sign of Aries. Aries is all about initiation, it's about new beginnings. It can be a bit naive, you know, because it doesn't have any experience, does it? Because this is when the cycle's rebooting, it's starting again. So it can be enthusiastic, it can be a little bit gung-ho, but it also has a lot of energy and a lot of initiative. And what a lot of people don't know is that Aries influences, or first house influences, are very instinctive. So sometimes they don't plan things hugely or analyse things hugely, they just go for it. So if you have a lot of first house energy in your natal chart, or you have Aries energy in your natal chart, you're going to be a bit of a go-getter, a bit of a risk-taker. But then we move into Taurus, and that's all about solidifying the process, making things more secure. It's governed by Earth, so it wants tangible results. It's also a fixed sign, so it likes stability. And that's where we've initiated something, we started the process, but now we want to firm it up into something more meaningful. Then we move into the sign of Gemini, or the third house. This is about ideas. It's about how we interact and socialise around us, gain information. It's really exciting, but it's very flexing, it's moving, because our knowledge is changing. It's mutable, therefore. But that brings us to Cancer. And Cancer is obviously about water. And also it's cardinal, so it's a leader sign, but it's about our environment. It's about how comfortable we feel. Do we feel safe, secure? Do we feel that we're listening to our gut feeling as much as we could? Which brings us to Leo, which is governed by the sun. So this is a burst of warming energy. It's enthusiasm, it's affectionate. It can be hugely charismatic. But you can have plenty of Leos who may have other complexes in their chart, which mean that they're only partially reflecting that archetype, because in some ways there may be other more challenging aspects in their chart, or they may be born with a lot of Cancer in their chart as well in terms of the other planets. So that brings about a different characterization, but it's very joyful. It's about play, creativity, children. That brings us to Virgo, which is about structuring things in a very efficient way. Again, it's earth, but it's mutable, so it flexes, it's quick-witted, it's sharp, it has an idea of detail. It also likes to provide services. It is about health, healing. It can be about personal sanitation, crucial in this year of COVID. But it's also about analysis, and that can be so crucial. But it can in some ways be rather detached from emotion. And then that brings us to Libra, which is about fairness, balance. And we're at the halfway point. It's looking across the heavens at that start point of Aries, that enthusiasm. And now Libra realises that it's about relationships as well. We need to connect and collaborate. We need to find some form of justice that governs us all fairly. This is Libra. This is the 7th house. And then we have the 8th house of how we evolve as human beings. This can be about death. It can be about reincarnation. But mainly it's about understanding the depth of situations, the psychology. But in a more pragmatic and prosaic way, it's about our resources, our shared resources, banking, investments, real estate. It can also be about inheritances and probate and things like this. Many people who work in banking or morticians would have lots of Scorpio or no Scorpio and lots of 8th house, which has that scorpionic energy. And then we have Sagittarius, which is about adventurism, independence. It's mutable, it's fiery, it wants to take on challenges. It's not too bothered with the little picture of Virgo. It wants the big picture. It wants excitement, it craves change, it likes independence. But it's also about knowledge, philosophy, history, international boundaries and borders. That brings us to Capricorn, where this crisis this year in terms of Western Tropical Astrology has manifested itself. This is about orthodox, it's about government, it's about business, it's about the father, it's about authority, it's about rules and regulations, it's about discipline. But it's also ruled by Saturn, the planet of limitation, of obstacles, of frustration. And therefore you could have somebody who has a Capricornian sun, but they may have loads of first house because their ascendant is either late in Sagittarius or in Capricorn, and these people can actually be full of enthusiasm but look for solid, tangible results. Capricornian energy. That brings us to Aquarius people who have a duality. It's the 11th sign of the zodiac. It is about the humanities. Why is it an air sign but has that glyph of the chap carrying the water? Why is it known as the water bearer? Because it's about baptism, it's about higher ideals, it's about the best of us. But it can also be very detached and cold. Its co-ruler is Saturn, which creates that. But it also loves tradition. It has a respect for tradition, as well as an appreciation of new beginnings in the future. A unique sign for sure. And then we have Pisces, the end of the journey of those animals. And this is where we reflect, we assimilate the energies of the other 11 zodiac signs. This is where we pull it all together. We think and evolve. This is where we meld. It's mutable, it's watery, it's empathetic, It's very much to do with spirituality. It's to do with the senses. But sometimes it can be impractical, for sure, because it's the opposite of Virgo, which is all about practicality and details. But it's still a necessary part of our evolution. So you can see the astrology is about us as human beings. It's so complex, but the basic premise is simple. It is the Earth's relationship to the Sun. Did you know also the Moon works its way around the Earth 12 times a year? 12 zodiac signs, 4 divisions of the seasons. We have the elements built into this situation as well, of air, earth, and also fire, and also water. And that gives us the basis of this ingenious system, which is still absolutely relevant today. About 30 years ago, I visited a huge cathedral in France called Chartres. Probably haven't said that right. But that's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and some of the most beautiful stained glass you could possibly see. It has zodiacal imagery in it. The 12 signs of the zodiac are so threaded into our cultures. Did you know that Galileo, Copernicus, Isaac Newton were all astrologers? Now, what the modern astronomical community has a problem with, it's almost like a cultural war that's going on between science, if you like, and also the more feeling side of life. And that's reflected in the clashes of the eclipses over the last 2.5 years in Cancer, feeling, Capricorn, fact. And what astrologers do is act as arbiters in the middle, because we take the maths of a chart, but we interpret in a way that fits to and reaches into the needs of a person's individual situation. So we're alchemists of the highest order, but we're people with a lot of integrity. We do not propagate a system which is not true to make money. We do it because we care about people. And frankly, I think a lot of this stuff comes about because scientists tend to be quite sniffy about astrology. And one of the things that you noticed about science is that it quite often says things like, well, we now know that this concept that we based a particular view of a situation around astrophysics, we now know that this is not true, that it's actually this. So a lot of science is based on theory. And yet they attack astrology because they say it's too ephemeral, it doesn't have any substance. Well, it does have enormous substance. They also say that we claim to see ourselves as a pseudoscience. No, we don't. We don't claim to be a science at all. Again, it's their stuff. Do you know, when it comes down to it, I think a lot of the problems with astronomers is that they're asked at dinner parties, so, Ted, you're an astronomer, are you? Tell me, what's happening for Scorpio this week? And of course, Ted doesn't like this because he studied long and hard. And I have the greatest respect for the Teds of this world. But there are some Teds within the Ted movement who are not very kind about astrology. And I think there is a kind of sense of entitlement about these people, rather than really understanding what astrology is truly about. And therefore we can have a proper conversation which can see astrology help the science. Rather than that, it's very polarised. And of course the press never lets the chance of a sensationalistic story get in the way of a headline without fact-checking, and then that's created this confusion which has come up cyclically every couple of years since 1995. So to clarify, your tropical zodiac is absolutely fine. If you are interested in Indian Vedic sidereal astrology, which is more moon based, that will very often, not always, but will very often put your zodiac sign, your sun, in a different sign to Western. So they're two different systems, both 360 degrees, both use 12 animal signs, not 13. There are some people who do work around the 13th Zodiac Sign principle, but they're working through sidereal astrology, essentially, not tropical astrology. You can continue to watch my videos, my colleagues' videos, but please be open to serious astrology, because it's the most incredible thing you will ever engage with. And a knowledge of our personal horoscope is one of the most incredibly uplifting things we can ever encounter in our lives. And you can get yours for free from me by downloading the link beneath this video. But also, if you do like information, scientifically based information, please check out the link below for the Correlation Journal of the Astrological Association of Great Britain. You can get that, and it's got oodles of evidence that astrology works. So please be reassured, it's all a myth, it's all being dragged up in a sensationalistic way, and it does come with a bit of mischief behind it, but you can continue to watch your zodiac sign in absolute confidence. Thank you so much for joining me. Stay safe, take care, and goodbye.